My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 41 years old. And on a cold Thursday morning in February of last year, I was already late for my life. I didn't know that yet, of course. None of us ever do. That morning started like so many others. The kind you forget before the day is even over. The kind that feels small, unimportant. I burned the eggs because I was answering an email on my phone. The coffee tasted bitter even after I added sugar. My son Daniel couldn't find his jacket. I told him it was exactly where I told him to put it. He said it wasn't. We were both right and we were both tired. I remember looking at the clock on the microwave and feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. Not pain, just pressure. Like time itself was sitting on me. Before that day, I was just a woman trying to hold everything together. I worked as an administrative assistant for a construction company. Nothing glamorous. Spreadsheets, invoices, phones that never stopped ringing. I prayed every morning, but if I'm being honest, it was usually rushed. A few words while brushing my teeth. God, please help me get through today. Then I'd run. My husband Aaron had been laid off the year before. He was picking up contract work when he could, but the gaps were scary. We were behind on bills. Not dangerously yet, but close enough that I checked the mailbox with my stomach clenched. At night, when the house was quiet, I lay awake counting numbers instead of sheep. I loved my family deeply. I know that now. But back then love felt heavy. Like another responsibility I was failing at. That morning, Daniel spilled his juice on the floor. I raised my voice. Not screaming, but sharp enough to cut. He froze. His eyes got wide. I said his name in that tone parents use when they're at the end of their rope. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom," and grabbed paper towels. I turned away so he wouldn't see the tears forming. I told myself I was just tired. That everyone snaps sometimes. That tomorrow I'd be better. Those were the kinds of promises I made to myself all the time. I grabbed my coat, kissed Daniel on the top of his head and rushed out the door. The winter air hit my face hard. It was gray, the kind of sky that looks like it's holding its breath. I sat in my car for a second with my hands on the steering wheel and whispered another prayer. This one slower. God, please don't let me mess this up. I didn't know what this was. I just knew I was afraid of it. As I pulled onto the road, I felt that heaviness again. Not dread exactly. More like a quiet knowing that something was off. The way animals sense a storm before the clouds arrive. I shook it away and turned up the radio. The news was on. People arguing. Always arguing. I sighed, tightened my grip on the wheel, and drove toward what I thought was just another ordinary day. I had no idea it was the last ordinary morning I would ever have. By late morning, the cold had lifted just enough to leave the air dry and sharp. The kind that tricks you into thinking it's harmless. I remember stepping out of my car and pulling my coat tighter even though the sun was out. The building looked the same as always. Beige walls, glass doors, a faded flag moving slowly in the wind. Inside, the phones were already ringing. I barely had time to take off my coat before someone called my name. Then another voice. Then another. Questions stacked on top of questions. A delivery that was late. A contractor who hadn't been paid. A meeting that had been moved up an hour without telling anyone. I sat down at my desk and started typing, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. That's how I lived then. Always catching up. Never arriving. Around noon, I realized I hadn't eaten. My stomach growled softly like it didn't want to bother me. I told myself I'd grab something later. I always said that. Later became never more often than not. The pressure in my chest came back. And not pain. Just a strange tightness, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and pulled it one notch too far. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath. In through my nose. Out through my mouth. The way my doctor once told me. Stress, I muttered under my breath. That word explained everything in my world. I stood up to get some water. Halfway to the break room, the room tilted. Not spinning. Tilting. Like the floor had gently decided it didn't want to be under me anymore. I grabbed the edge of a desk and laughed it off, embarrassed. Someone asked if I was okay. I nodded. Of course I nodded. Then it happened. The tightness exploded into heat. Not fire exactly. More like pressure turning solid. My left arm went numb first. It felt heavy, distant, like it didn't belong to me. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no sound came out. The office noise faded. The phones kept ringing, but they sounded far away. Like they were in another building. Or another life. I remember staring at the carpet. blue-gray with a small coffee stain near my shoe. I remember thinking how strange it was that I'd noticed that stain for months but never cleaned it. Such a small thing to think about while everything else was coming apart. My knees buckled. I hit the floor harder than I expected. The sound echoed in my head. Someone shouted my name. A chair scraped back. I felt hands on my shoulders, but I couldn't feel the warmth of them. My breath came shallow and fast, like I was trying to breathe through a straw. The ceiling lights were too bright. They buzzed softly. I focused on one flicker in the corner, telling myself to stay with it. Just stay. A thought cut through the panic, clear and sharp. I didn't say goodbye. Daniel's face flashed in my mind. The way he looked that morning when I raised my voice. The juice on the floor. His small hands holding paper towels. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I wanted to tell him that none of it mattered. Not the mess. Not the schedule. Not the pressure. My chest seized. Someone said they were calling 911. Someone else said to stay with me. I wanted to answer them. I wanted to tell them I was trying. But my body wasn't listening anymore. The lights blurred. The buzzing stopped. And then just like that, the world went quiet. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the awkward kind. Not the empty kind. It was deep and full, like the quiet that settles over the world after a heavy snowfall. A silence so complete it feels alive. I realized I wasn't on the floor anymore. I was standing, or something like standing, but there was no ground beneath me. No ceiling either. No walls. Just space. Soft, endless space. I felt light. Not emotionally light. Physically. As if gravity had finally decided to leave me alone. I looked down. My body was there on the office floor. So small. Almost fragile. People were kneeling around it. Someone was pressing on my chest. Someone else was crying. I watched them with curiosity, not fear. Felt like looking at a coat I used to wear. Familiar but no longer mine. I should have panicked. I know that now. But I didn't. Instead, a strange understanding washed over me. Clear and calm. I'm not there anymore. The pressure in my chest was gone. The tightness, the weight, the constant hum of worry that had followed me for years. It was all gone. I hadn't realized how heavy I'd been carrying it until it disappeared. I felt free. Not excited. Not euphoric. Just deeply, profoundly okay. Time didn't behave the way it used to. There was no rush. No urgency. No sense that something was about to happen or had already happened. Everything simply was. I became aware of movement, though I wasn't walking. It felt like being carried by a gentle current, the way water moves you when you stop fighting it. There was no resistance. No effort. Colors began to appear. Not colors I could name. They weren't red or blue or anything I'd ever seen. They felt more than they looked. Warmth had a color. Peace had a color. Love had layers. I remember thinking, without words, that this must be what prayer is supposed to feel like when you finally stop talking and start listening. There was no fear of judgment. No replay of mistakes. No voice listing my failures. All the things I had worried God was keeping track of simply weren't there. Every moment I had snapped. Every time I had been impatient. Every prayer I had rushed or skipped altogether. It didn't follow me into that space. What followed me was something else. Longing. Not for things. Not for my house or my job or the life I'd been trying so hard to manage. For truth. For home. I didn't see a tunnel. I didn't hear music. There were no angels with wings, no grand announcements. Just a growing sense of nearness. Like standing on the edge of something holy without fully seeing it yet. Then the space around me changed. Not abruptly. Gently. Like a breath being drawn. And I understood before I saw anything at all, that I was no longer alone. I want to be careful here because words are clumsy things. What I encountered was not a figure standing in front of me the way one person stands before another. There was no shape my eyes could trace because I didn't have eyes the way I used to. And yet I knew, more surely than I have ever known anything, that he was there. Before I felt anything else, I noticed the air change. It carried a scent. Clean and familiar. Like rain hitting dry ground after a long season without it. That first breath after a storm breaks the heat. It wasn't just a smell. It was a memory written into my soul. Hope has a fragrance, and that was it. Then came the light. Not blinding. Not harsh. It didn't demand attention. It invited it. Soft like a candle flame in a dark room, but vast, endless, stronger than anything I had ever known. I didn't shield myself from it. I leaned into it. And in that light I understood something that undid me completely. I was known. Every hidden fear. Every unspoken prayer. Every moment I had felt small or forgotten or inadequate. It was all seen. Not exposed. Embraced. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or defend my choices. There was no courtroom. No scales. No list of charges. There was love. Not the fragile, conditional kind I had spent my life trying to earn. This love didn't rise and fall with my performance. It didn't flicker when I failed. It simply was. I realized I wasn't standing before love. I was standing inside it. Time stopped meaning anything. My heartbeat, the frantic rhythm that had driven me my entire life, was gone. I didn't need it anymore. Peace had taken its place. Not the absence of trouble but the presence of God. He didn't speak with a voice. The truth arrived fully formed, the way understanding does when it's deeper than language. I didn't hear, "I love you." I experienced what it means to be love's creation. Every moment I had believed I was failing as a mother, a wife, a woman of faith, those thoughts dissolved. Not ignored. Healed. Like dirt rinsed away in clear water. I saw my prayers then. Not the words but the heart behind them. Even the rushed ones. Even the broken ones. None of them had been wasted. None of them had gone unheard. Faith, I understood, was never about getting everything right. It was about turning toward Him even when your hands are shaking. Then the atmosphere shifted. The warmth remained but something else joined it. Gravity. Purpose. The way a father's presence changes when he needs to tell you something that matters. And without fear, without doubt, I knew I was about to be shown why I had been allowed to see this place at all. The light didn't fade but it pulled back just enough for me to see. What unfolded wasn't a picture. It was a knowing that became visible. I was shown a land I recognized without seeing a map. It was America, but not as borders or highways or cities labeled with names. I saw it as something alive. A great tree stood before me. Its trunk was wide and strong, marked by age and history. Its branches stretched in every direction, heavy with possibility. People stood on those branches. Millions of them. They looked different from one another. Dressed differently. Speaking different words. Arguing. Shouting. Pointing across the gaps at one another. They were fighting over which branch mattered more. As they shouted, the ground beneath the tree began to crack. The roots were deep but the soil around them was dry. Starving. I could see fractures spreading through the earth, turning rich ground into pale dust and ash. The people on the branches didn't notice. Or they noticed and didn't care. They were too busy being right. The understanding entered me gently but it carried weight. The shaking is not punishment. It was a warning. I was shown homes filled with noise but no prayer. Tables with food but no gratitude. Churches full of words but empty of surrender. I saw hearts hardened not by cruelty, but by exhaustion, fear, and pride. Faith had become something people argued about instead of lived. Then the shaking began. Not bombs. Not fire from the sky. A trembling of foundations. I saw shortages. I saw confusion. I saw fear moving faster than truth. I saw people retreating into themselves, building walls made not of stone, but of distrust and resentment. And still this was not the end. Because then I saw something else. In the darkness, small moments of light appeared. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things without cameras, without applause. A man bowing his head in prayer in a quiet kitchen. A woman whispering the name of Jesus over a child who wasn't her own. A neighbor sharing food when there wasn't enough to spare. Every time someone chose love, something miraculous happened. A thin, golden thread extended from their heart and wove itself into the roots of the tree. The ground darkened. The cracks slowed. Life returned where love was given. I understood then with absolute clarity. The tree would not be saved by power. It would not be saved by politics. It would not be saved by money or control. It would be saved by faith made visible through love. Prayer was not weak. It was water. Love was not naive. It was structural. Faith was not private. It was foundational. Then His presence pressed closer and the truth settled into my bones. Tell them the shaking is meant to wake them, the knowing said. Tell them that what survives is what is surrendered. Tell them that only what is rooted in me will stand. I felt the urgency then. Not fear but responsibility. I wanted to stay. I wanted to remain in that light, in that peace where nothing hurt and nothing was uncertain. I thought of my worries, my failures, the weight of being human. I didn't want to go back. And that's when he showed me my son. Daniel was sitting on my bed, clutching my coat to his chest. His shoulders shook as he cried into the fabric. His small voice whispered my name like a prayer he didn't know how to finish. The message was unmistakable. Your life is not over, he impressed upon me. Your mission has changed. Go back. Love them. Pray. Tell them that I am still here. And before I could protest again, before I could beg him to let me stay just a little longer, the light wrapped around me one final time. Full of trust. Full of purpose. And then, I was falling. The return was violent. There's no gentle way to say it. One moment I was held in perfect peace and the next I was slammed back into weight and pain and breath. My chest burned. My throat felt raw like I had been screaming. Air rushed into my lungs against my will, sharp and cold. I heard a voice say my name. Then another. The smell hit me next. Not rain. Not light. Bleach. Plastic. Something sterile and unforgiving. I opened my eyes to a white ceiling. Too white. Too solid. My body felt foreign, heavy like I had been dropped into something several sizes too small. A nurse froze when she saw my eyes open. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. She ran. A doctor came in a few moments later. He looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. He sat on the edge of the bed and spoke quietly, like he didn't want to startle me back out of the world again. He told me my heart had stopped. He told me it had been nearly 12 minutes before they got it back. He told me, medically speaking, I shouldn't be conscious. I shouldn't be speaking. I shouldn't remember anything at all. You were gone, he said softly. I wanted to tell him about the tree. About the roots. About the golden threads. But my body was weak and words felt too small. Instead I reached out and touched his hand. He flinched at first, then looked at me. Really looked. For just a moment something in his face softened. That was my first thread. I'm home now. Life didn't magically become easy. The bills didn't disappear. My husband still struggles to find steady work. Some days my chest still tightens and fear tries to creep back in. But something fundamental has changed. I pray differently now. Not perfectly. Not with fancy words. But honestly. Fully. I don't rush through it like a task on a list. I sit with God. I listen. I don't raise my voice about spilled juice or missing jackets anymore. When Daniel looks at me, I want him to see safety, not stress. Love, not hurry. When I watch the news and see the anger, the division, the shaking of everything we thought was stable, I don't feel panic. I understand it. We are not being destroyed. We are being invited back to what matters. Faith that is lived, not argued. Prayer that is real, not performative. Love that costs something. So I want to ask you something. If your heart stopped today, if your ordinary morning turned out to be your last, what would be the final thing your soul carried with it? Would it be frustration? Fear? Words you wish you could take back? Or would it be a golden thread? A prayer whispered? A kindness given? Love offered freely in the name of God? America is at a crossroads. I saw it. The tree is thirsty. But the water isn't in elections or banks or power. It's in your hands. In your homes. In your knees bent in prayer. In your willingness to love the person standing right in front of you. Don't wait for your heart to stop to remember God. Don't wait for the shaking to teach you what love is. Start weaving now.